everyone, Gleesa here, made with glee. I'm in my kitchen, bad lighting, I apologize. But I'm here to share with you my trade secrets and how to decorate a Guyanese black cake for Christmas or a wedding or whenever. So if you're not familiar with what black cake is, in the West Indies and in the Caribbean, we make a rum cake, a fruit cake that we call black cake. I'm not gonna do it, but you can Google or you can search YouTube. There's lots of Guyanese and Jamaican and Trinidadian YouTubers who've already shared really good recipes on how to make black cake, the traditional fruit cake of the islands. But I don't make black cake. My auntie makes black cake. She makes really good black cake, so I don't bother to do it. She makes it and sends it to me, and yes, we bake it in cans. We save these cans. Us Caribbean people, we're really good at recycling. So we love using our cookie cans for baking the cake because not only is it convenient just to store it in there, but it's a perfect size when you're making these cakes. Now what you're gonna need, of course, is a cake board. You're gonna need confection sugar, some meringue powder, and I'm going to explain that to you. Instead of white, egg whites. I don't use egg whites, and I'm going to tell you all about that when we get to the mixing part of the royal icing. But before we even get to the royal icing, what we need to do is we need to cover our cake with marzipan. Now, why do you cover black cake with marzipan? Because the oils in the cake, it will seep through the royal icing, and while it's perfectly fine, and you can certainly do it that way, I prefer a nice clean cake. And the marzipan, not only does it provide a nice layer of almond paste, nougat to taste that tastes really good with the royal icing, but it provides a nice, smooth, clean surface for you to ice your cake with. So this particular brand is called Odense. I like to use this brand. You can make marzipan from scratch, of course, using ground almonds, raw almonds, grind them, and make your own almond paste. But I just prefer to buy it because it's easier, and one of these tubes covers and works for one of this cookie size sheet cake, and I believe this is about an 8-inch round cake. So I'm gonna stop this video, I'm gonna turn you around, and I'm gonna show you the entire process of how you're gonna be able to follow my instructions and cover your black cake. And again, this is for Christmas, birthdays, any occasion. We love black cake, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. So hold on. Okay guys, so the first thing you do is you take your cake and you put it onto your cake board. Obviously, if it was made with like wax paper, parchment on the bottom, you peel that off, put your cake down. Now I'm going to take the marzipan and I'm going to roll it out. This is an 8-inch cake, so I'm going to roll out my marzipan to roughly 10 inches, and that way it covers both the top and the sides. And normally you would trim the excess around and discard it if you're making this professionally. Being this is a cake for my family, I'm just going to tuck the extra marzipan on the underneath because, marzipan is good. So it's going to be tucked in on the underneath of it. And this is very simple to do, but the very and most important trick here and tip is once you put the marzipan on your cake, you need to let this dry overnight before you put your royal icing on there. There's a sheen to it, and that's the oils, and basically you want it to air dry and remove some of that extra oils, so that way when you put your royal icing on, there's again no oils with the royal icing. Royal icing is very fickle. It will become soft, it will crack, it will do all sorts of things that you don't expect it to do if there's any bits of grease in there. So preferentially you would let this dry completely overnight, but being the purposes of YouTube, I am just gonna go ahead and do this all today for you because why not? So again, number one tip, once you cover up marzipan, let it dry overnight. Okay guys, the next step that we're going to talk about is making the royal icing. To make royal icing, you're going to need a pound or 1 box of confectioner sugar or powdered sugar. Now, traditionally we use egg whites to make royal icing, but because of all sorts of health concerns and people's fears of salmonella and things like that, Here in the US, we no longer use egg whites to make, or I don't use egg whites to make my royal icing. I use now meringue powder. Now meringue powder is basically powdered egg whites. That's basically what it is. And the number one and most important thing that you need to remember when making royal icing is that you have to make sure your utensils, the things that you're going to be using, is completely free of any sorts of oils, greases, things like that. So the first tip, what I recommend that you do is you wash your bowls, your spoons, your mixing utensils, anything that you're going to be using, give it a quick wash in some vinegar and water. Like I just make a bowl of, I'll take a bowl, I'll put it in my sink, I'll put vinegar, I'll put water, and I put all of my utensils in there, let it soak for a few minutes, then I rinse them out, dry them completely. Now, besides the confectioner sugars and the meringue powder, depends on your taste. Some people like to put a bit of rose water for flavor in their icing. And some people don't like their royal icing to be really rock hard. They want it to have a little softer consistency. And if that's what you're going for, I'd recommend using some teaspoon of glycerin, and that will give you that softer consistency. You're also going to need lemon juice and water. So I'm going to grab all of my ingredients and I'm going to show you exactly how to make that. Okay guys, so you have your clean bowl. And now we're going to sift our powdered sugar. This is another important tip from me to you. It is very, very necessary. Do not skip this step for you to sift your powdered sugar. If you don't, it will affect the consistency of your royal icing. So you want to make sure that your powdered sugar is nice and sifted, no lumps, no clumps before you start. And now royal icing, you can use this to make all sorts of things, from beautiful flowers and scroll work, all sorts of things, but it's a consistency, and sifting your sugar is the most important step in this process of making your royal icing. Now we're going to take a tablespoon and we're going to measure 3 level tablespoons of meringue powder. So not heaped tablespoons, but leveled tablespoons of meringue powder. So I don't know how much it equates to, but maybe 3 tablespoons of meringue powder is equal to about 3 to 5 egg whites, if you were still using the old-fashioned method. Again, I don't know the exact conversion, but that's what I'm assuming. Now I have my mixer on low, and as it's on low, I started with just mixing the meringue and the powdered sugar, and now I've added 4 tablespoons of water and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And now basically we're gonna let this mix, and we're gonna mix and mix and mix and mix and mix for approximately about 5 minutes. I mean, just let this thing keep going and going and going. And it really helps to have a KitchenAid for this. I used to do this by hand on a hand mixer. I've burnt out many hand mixers. So now, as you can see here, about 5 minutes later, we're getting our peaks, and this is a stiff consistency. If you wanted to make roses and, flowers and stuff like that, you can certainly use it at this consistency to pipe them out onto wax paper. But here we're going to frost the cake, so we're going to need it to be a little bit softer. So after 5 minutes, I've added on into my mix another tablespoon of water and 1 teaspoon of glycerin. And now if you wanted to add another flavor, such as the rose water, you would add 1 teaspoon here, not tablespoon, but teaspoon. And then continue to mix. And I let this mix again for maybe another 4 or 5 minutes. It's a total of about 10 minutes of just constant mixing. And once that is done, again, you can see here we have our nice peaks, and it is completely ready to go start ice our cake with this. You're going to fill this up into your bags, color it, whatever you need to do. So now I'm going to show you guys exactly how I decorate my cake. And this is pretty simple, my methods right now that I'm going to be using. My hands are no longer what they used to be, so I'm unable to do all the details that I used to do. So I'm going to just, please forgive me for this. I'm no longer the expert, or, I should say, at doing these cakes. I haven't actually iced a cake in quite a while because of my hand issues. So here I am just covering both the top and the sides with my royal icing. And if you're doing this professionally for anyone, obviously, like I said before, you're going to let your marzipan dry overnight so that all the oils are gone. And then after you put this top coat of icing on, I would let this dry again overnight before I add any decorations, such as scroll work and piping and flowers and things like that. I would wait an entire 24 hours before, or overnight I should say, before 12 hours at least, before I start doing the decorations. But again, being this is YouTube and we're doing this as a cake for my family on Christmas, I'm gonna just do it all in one shot for you, all at once. No waiting. We're not going to let it set up or anything like that. Now, there's a couple different ways to get a really smooth texture on your cake. I would recommend, of course, not hot water, but like lukewarm water. And just dip your spatula in it. Rub the cake, wipe off the excess. And you can keep doing that until it's as smooth as you like. Now, again, time reasons, I didn't go for a perfectly smooth, and I really, my hands and just time and all the things I have to do, I didn't bother with all of that. Now I've taken all the remaining icing from the bowl that I made, and I've put white in one bag with a star tip, and then the other two I'm gonna mix a little bit of red and a little bit of green. Now gel food coloring does give you a much better color, but I lent my sister-in-law my red and green, so I'm using like watered down the regular, the cheaper variety of food coloring. But this again changes the consistency of your icing, so always keep that in mind. And I don't like to have too much of that, I don't want to change the taste and texture or consistency of my icing, so I try not to use too much of it. Now I did find some additional supposedly red, but it's really actually more of a fuchsia color, and I tried putting a little bit of that and some more green, and to make my different colors. Now another tip for you when doing this is to take a wet paper towel and wrap your tips. That way your icing does not crust over or dry up in the tubes before you pipe them. And this is especially helpful if you're doing multiple colors and something fancy like that. Then you definitely want to have them prepared and covered with some wet paper towel, or put them in a plastic bag. That also, especially if you're keeping them for a little while you're doing the process. Again, I'm doing this all at once, so I'm not taking the time to do that. Now, I used to be very good at piping really nice designs and scroll works and all these things. And maybe one day I'll find all the pictures to show you of all the different cakes I've made over the years. But here, I'm just doing really simple and really quick. I'm just piping on all the way around the top and bottom of my cake to create some sort of decorative border. Now, again, you can get as fancy as you would like, and I definitely recommend taking more time. The tips you can use a wide variety and make beautiful scrolls and beautiful flowers and poinsettias and whatever you wanted. But again, due to my hand issues, I settled for the simple, so I'm just using a straight circular tip and just piping on some little pine branches and red holly berries. So this is how I decorated my Christmas cake. I hope you guys like it. I hope you paid attention to those tips that I mentioned. Definitely make sure that you let your marzipan dry overnight before you ice your cake. Second, make sure that you have your bowls completely and utensils completely grease-free by washing them in vinegar and water before using them. Also, sift your sugar before you start mixing. You can add the glycerin if you wanted that softer consistency. What else did I mention to you? I'm trying to remember all the tips, but there's quite a few little tips and tricks that could help your process of doing royal icing go by a little bit easier. Keep your tips covered in a wet paper towel so it doesn't dry out. And if you're doing this professionally, let that first layer completely dry before you even add your decorations. And if you do that, you can always, if it's not smooth enough, you can add a second layer of icing. If the cake was lopsided like mine is a little bit here, you can add another layer of icing and even it up after you let it dry. And royal icing, marzipan, and black cake is the best combination. It will keep your cake moist and it will last a long time. But we're not going to make it last any past Christmas Day. So I hope you guys like my tips and my Christmas cake. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing. Have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas.